BWI Airport in Baltimore at 10:15 this morning. We flew to Detroit. It took about an hour. We changed planes in Detroit and flew to Seattle. That was about 4.5-hour flight. We changed planes in Seattle and flew to Anchorage, Alaska. That was about a 3-hour flight. Then we changed planes in Anchorage, Alaska and arrived in Fairbanks, Alaska about 10:30 at night. So everything is extremely well organized. We didn't see our baggage until we got to our room here at the hotel, and the people are very nice, and we just had a very excellent dinner. Mary had a filet mignon, and I had salad, and I had salmon, and it was absolutely delicious. So we're just taking a couple of shots here in front of the hotel.
Look at the sky.
Now, this is very unusual because it's, like I said, it's 1 o'clock in the morning in West Virginia, and I'm shooting around the sky, and it's only, what time is it here? 9 o'clock?
8.
Harry just noticed this, but it's very unusual. We see a car here parked in front of the motel, the hotel, that has a plug extending from the front bumper, and moving over here they have electrical outlets in front of the parking lots, apparently to charge up your car in the evening when it gets cold so it doesn't freeze up.
Temperature
It's amazing.
when we arrived was 41, supposed to go down to 24
Tonight.
and snow tomorrow. Good luck. Wait, what was that?
We'll just say good luck tomorrow. We're going on a boat ride.
Good luck tomorrow. We're going on a boat ride.
This is another view. Showing the outdoor dining area. There's Mary trying to get warm. And here's a shot panning around down the river. Apparently they've got a boat dock here, and as you can see, there's very little activity. I think the season's over. Apparently people have homes right here on the river. There's one that's down from the hotel. Just panning around here, if we can see a couple. People have some canoes on the river. I think there's another one back in here somewhere. There it is. One going up.
Everybody's inside keeping them warm. Look at that sky. It's beautiful.
I'll give you a shot of the sky now. Just a comment, when we were flying up here from Seattle, the plane flew over most of the inland passage that we're going to be coming down from Anchorage down to Vancouver next week. So we had the opportunity to see it, the inland passage, or a lot of it that was in cloud cover, from about 39,000 feet in the air, and next week we're going to be able to see it from the rail of a boat. So that was quite an interesting thing that we did, and we're looking forward to seeing it from the sea.
There's an airplane.
What we had down, quite good. Here's a white bear that they've got mounted on the wall of the hotel. That looks huge. We're walking down the hall of this hotel. As you can see, some of the people haven't picked up our baggage, but ours was right outside the room, and We didn't see the baggage from the time we put it on the at the airport in Baltimore until it was outside our room. So we were a little worried as to whether it was going to show up, but it was here.
Again, real quickly before we take off,
the Chena River, and we're ready to go on the Chena Riverboat cruise. There's Mary ready to dive into the river. Just saw a beaver. She wants to go swimming. This is a picture of the smaller riverboat. I guess they use when they're filled up on the big one. This is Discovery 2. I don't know how this picture is going to turn out, but you can see there's another float plane down the river, and those two spots out in the river are beavers. They're pretty far away, and you probably can't see them too well, but you can see the wake in the water. This is a shot from the upper deck of the riverboat. You can see it's quite a big boat. And here are the paddle wheels. I'll get a shot of this when the thing gets moving. This is a shot of the Discovery trading post where the riverboat is. Nice shots.
Our lead deckhand just gave me a wristwatch. If you're missing a watch, I'm up on the second deck, and you can describe it for me. On the back on the port,
you
the
can
left
see
side,
there's
the
a
right side. You may move around
home right beside the river here with smoke coming out of the chimney.
For a while, then come back and warm up. That's fine.
Oh, this morning when we got up, it was 33 degrees here.
That'll let everybody know who's sitting there. We've
It's now
a
about
nice, comfortable, intimate load of folks this morning, so there'll be lots of
8:39 or 8:40, and the temperature is up to about 40. I don't know whether you can see him or not, but there's a little beaver down there. His head poking up out of the water.
Good morning. Now, the captain is here. We're ready to go on the boat ride.
We're starting up.
But about October 15th, that's all going to come to a screeching halt, because there's going to be 6 feet of ice in this river. A man named Bill Johnson flies out of here, and his phone rang one January morning. It was 40 below, and it was our hospital on the other end. They said, Bill... We are trying to keep our Discovery #1 ready as a training ship for our grandchildren. It's been out of service for several years, getting to be look a little hilly in places. So we're doing the mechanical work and cleaning up the inside, getting all set up to train our grandchildren, of which we have 11. Oldest is 16. From Ruby, Alaska. A village up on the Yukon with a lot of history connected to it.
There's
We're
another
also
float
going up
plane.
to
It seems like everybody who lives on this river has got a float
here,
plane.
and I think east. And so here's Andy. She's a nursing major at the university coming up. Log home over here on the right. This has a metal roof, and you'll notice that that metal is. See how the sun is shining on it in the spring. That warms that metal up right through the snow, and pretty soon it just slides right off of there. So it comes to the law of gravity, and that sure beats shoveling it. We can get a lot of snow around here. You'll notice the ridge poles sticking out the front too. You see the pioneers built those poles out there so they could hang the moose and the caribou carcasses in those poles and dry them out in the fall before the thing froze up. And at the airport, the Reagan stayed here along with 40 to 45 Secret Service agents camped out on the lawn in their three-piece suits and their sleeping bags. That was an interesting... See, some of us really want you to know that. I guess it's I don't know whether it's an inferiority complex or what. We want you to know that while the frozen ground underneath, if they had any of that stuff, they wanted to make sure it settled so it wouldn't move after they cut the windows and doors in. Beautiful job. Pretty home right next door with these big windows. Take a look at these windows. These are triple pane windows, and they keep the heat in the house in the winter and let a little more light in. And you know we get kind of short of light around the 21st of December. The sun comes up on the shortest day of the year, right to the south, right ahead of the boat. At 10:30 in the morning, goes right back down at 2:30 in the afternoon. Which was okay, actually, because we figured if the Russians ever dropped a big one, we'd have a day to party before Walter Cronkite cages and warning lights and things in front of him. Now, he could run the whole operation from the wheelhouse. But on that boat, the Yukon, they had an engineer and 2 firemen down in one of the hottest places you can imagine, the engine room of a steamboat, shoving cordwood in there about as fast as they could go. Now, he also uses the video, and it looks like we have some puppies to share with you, and some of the great ideas.
Is that better?
There we go.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's a beautiful day for us. I hope it is for you.
Well, it's nice and cool. Does that mean you guys have been sleeping in here?
Well, actually, you know, we can't really sleep in around this place because there's a lot of things to do when you're in the animal relationship business. You have to work 7 days a week, and of course it's a labor of love. You can see it's not too tough duty, but we have to get up really early in the morning when it's cool so that we can go running dogs.
Well, now, how do you do that without any snow around here?
We do it exactly the same. For the dogs, it's the same experience as on the sled because they're hooked up in tandem, which means two dogs in each section of gangline, and we hook 8 to 12 dogs up with behind a four-wheel cart, the same as we would a sled. And then on the four-wheel cart, we are able to travel on the little gravel trails here that go out to the sand dunes on the Tanana. You'll be coming to the Tanana in a couple of minutes. And we go through the sand dunes and down through the little sloughs on the warmer days to cool off.
This really simulates some of the obstacles that you find out on the Iditarod and Yukon Quest Trail then.
Well, absolutely. That's the reason, we have two pieces of property. We have two parts of Trailbreaker Kennel. We have the in-town portion, which is on the river, which simulates a lot going on the Yukon River and across the frozen Bering Sea, because they're vast expanses of ice where you can really travel quite efficiently and smoothly at, and you can run the large teams on that. And then on the mountainous sections of the trail, we have our Eureka property, which is out in an old gold mining district, and actually the trails out there were developed for hauling gold and mail around. So they're very narrow and twisty, and they lead down into the little gold camps. And so we can only run about 8 dog teams there, whereas on this property, coming right here onto the river, which is frozen in a few months, we can run as high as a 20 dog team.
Well, I think we're getting upstaged here by the pups, David, so we better do some introductions here.
I'll let Susan talk to about pups.
Let's say good morning to four-time Iditarod champion Susan Butcher right here. This is great.
Good morning. Thank you. Yeah, well, we hit the puppies at a time where they're having breakfast, as you can see, and that's all they're interested in. I'm going to start by introducing you to them. There's 6 of them, and they're 6 weeks old today, actually, and this is a really fun age for us. They're very rambunctious. They can go out on their morning runs with us. We take them just loose with a bunch of the older dogs for about between 2 and 7 miles. And it's during that time that we're teaching them a trust and be trusted relationship. By the time they're 5 months old, we're going to put them into harness for their first time. And so that it's important that they really understand what our part in that is with them. And they need to know that we're never going to ask them to go any further or faster than they're capable of. And they also need to know that the challenges that we're going to encounter together out in the wilderness are fun and that we're there to help them. And so right now we do things like taking them out, and they maybe have a little stream that's maybe just 4 inches deep to cross. But that can be a big obstacle when you're this little. So we're there calling them over from the other side and encouraging them. And if they make it over, a lot of praising. But if they don't make it over, we're there to just carry them over and help them and praise them nonetheless. And that's the important relationship we're working on right now with these guys. When I harness break them at 5 months of age, it's incredible how instinctive it is in these guys to pull. I'll just take one adult leader, put them out in front with 6 puppies behind, and off they go, and they just look like a small adult team. It takes me no time at all to teach them their forward commands. In fact, less than 2 minutes. But I've always said it takes me at least 2.5 years to teach them to whoa. And this is their mother, and her name is Hole-in-One. She was the only puppy born to the last litter of one of my great sled dogs, Cracker. And so we named her Hole-in-One, and she has easily lived up to that name. She's one of my main team dogs and has run the Iditarod for me the last 2 years. And the father of these puppies looks just like these red ones. His name is Sluggo, and he was my main leader in the 1990 Iditarod, which he won for me in record time. And then I've got one other dog with us here this morning, and that's he's retired now. He's 14 years old, and he was my main leader for 8 years. And we have 28 retired dogs. All the dogs that we raise and that race with us retire with us. And they're very important to our kennel. They are, of course, our old friends who help keep our couch warm. But they also train these younger dogs, not just by being the leaders for them, but also just by hanging around with them and going out on our walks in the wilderness with them. But Granite has a kind of special story. He won the 1986 and 87 Iditarods for me, and both of those he did in record time. And he also won countless other races for me between 200 and 600 miles in length. We try to run a number of races a year, 5 or 6. in addition to the Iditarod. And Granite's story goes on from there, because while we were training for the 1988 racing season, he became very seriously ill. And he had to rush off to Anchorage to a veterinary hospital where we tried to save his life. And of course he lived. I set up a cot next to his kennel at the hospital where I could sleep with him there day and night, petting him and willing him to live. And he finally got better after 2 weeks, and I could take him back home to our homestead in Eureka. But the veterinarians told me that he could never run again, that he had permanent damage to his heart and liver and kidneys. And when I took him home, he would cry and howl every time I would take the other dogs out on runs, wishing that he could go out with them. And what the vets didn't understand about Granite is that he had grown to be a magnificent canine athlete who loved to run and race. And all the dogs love running and racing, and they understand when they have won. And they have as much pride as any human athlete. And Granite was determined to get back on that team. And slowly but surely, his test results started showing improvements that the veterinarians were astounded at. And they decided to let him run with the little puppies on 2-mile runs. And he soon advanced to running with the yearlings on 10-mile runs. But at that time of year, myself and my main team, we were going up to 50 miles in a single run. But by January, Granite was once again running with the main racing team, and the veterinarians okayed him for a 200-mile race.
Wow.
And he towed that young team to a record-setting victory. And then by March, he went on to do the impossible. He led me once again to victory in the Iditarod, and he did it in record time by pulling me through a blinding snowstorm that stopped all of my competitors. So we finished 14 hours in front of the second-place musher. And that made Granite the only dog to ever win 3 consecutive Iditarods.
Absolutely. How about that? That is a fabulous animal and a true champion, and of course typical of your record here at Trailbreaker Kennels. Susan,
He's going to check out one of his girlfriends.
Uh-oh. you never lose that instinct. Well, that's good. Well, I know you've been on the trail 17 years on the Iditarod, and of course along with David, and also over on the Yukon Quest. What's ahead here for Trailbreaker Kennels?
Well, we love both those races and wish we had time to just keep doing them, but since the Iditarod started 21 years ago, there were no long-distance races at that time, and now dog munching has blossomed all over the world. There are many great long-distance races in a lot of the European countries, in the lower 48 states, and Canada.
It's winter in Australia. We'll have to talk to the folks down there.
Well, that's right, and the South American ones do happen in our summers, so we could be dog munching all year round on snow.
Around the world. Well, that would be terrific. Well, thank you so much, Susan Butcher and David Monson. We appreciate you bringing the dogs down here. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks for stopping by.
And he's a retired contractor. He used to put his heavy equipment on this barge and go out and help his Athabascan friends with their construction, lived in the mobile home. And yes, he is a candidate for governor. About every other election, he wants to go to Juneau and straighten them out down there. And John built this big shed out beside there, and he's got a sweat lodge, and the rumors there are a swimming pool. There may be an 18-hole golf course in there. Now, land up here is an interesting wrinkle. We have times, if you live out of town, it's hard to get in, but the teachers are there. And that was totally before we got started up along the Seward Peninsula and north of the Brooks Range. But these animals look very much like the wild caribou. There's really no difference on the biological family tree. It's just that reindeer are domesticated. And the adults were actually rescued from an island off the southwest coast of Alaska. They're owned by a gentleman up at Nome who's a commercial herder, an Eskimo friend of ours, and he had a little...
This is where one river meets the other, the Chena and the Tanawa.
Well, you guys are on a roll. We'd like to keep you around here because, of course, Susan Butcher being on shore is kind of lucky, and also you're in for a real treat up here without much wind on the surface. We're going to see a spectacular wetting of the rivers coming up. This is due to an interesting phenomenon. Now, the Chena is fed primarily by artesian springs and a lot of rainfall runoff in the foothills about 60 miles upriver, also, of course, melting snow in the spring. But this Tanana River is an entirely different operation. About 200 miles off to the left, the Alaska Range and Wrangell-St. Elias Mountains come together, and over 100 glaciers spill down the sides of those mountains and grind the rock and soil under them to a powder that's as fine and soft as baking flour. And there are hundreds of thousands of tons of this material in this river even as we speak. So as we go across the line, you'll see clouds of this glacial silt boiling up off the bottom in very interesting cloud formations that mark the joining of the two rivers here. In fact, the Athabascans have a beautiful word for this. In their language, this is known as Nuchalawoya, the wedding of the river.
Good. It's bubbling up.
Where?
Right here.
Oh, yeah.
Got it?
Now, this almost looks like miniature volcanoes, but it's just simply the mixing of the water, because this dust is so fine and soft that it is always in suspension. You could just stir the water a little bit, and you would stir it up if you had it in a jar. I don't know if you've seen the film of the top of Mount St. Helens blowing off ever, but this is what it reminds me of, and it is really cooking up a storm. As the water flows over deep holes here, the water of the Tanana flows down, bounces back up again, and of course brings the silt with it. Steamboat captains in the old days called this the boils. And when you look at this, it does remind you of water slowly boiling in a saucepan. Of course, that's one reason the cloud formations occur. This is really something today.
Ooh.
Sometimes hourly, definitely daily, so you don't see any buoys or channel markers or aids to navigation out here at all. And this is why the river pilots have to learn to read the patterns on the surface, which you can begin to pick up. Some of these boiling patterns and circles, there are ripples and ripples and things. This will tell Jim exactly where the deep part of the channel is over there. That's the way they loaded on the decks of the old steamboats. I have good news. We get the morning off, we get to go on the tour, but if this were 1915, it'd be a different story. We'd have to spend an hour and a half hauling that wood down the bank and putting it on the bow so we could get home. We'd burn a quart of that an hour going upstream. But let's hear it for diesel fuel. I know the truck arrived last night, so we're going to get to go for a walk with the ladies too this morning. Now over here, show us how this salmon is dressed out. Dixie's also working on her sewing. She's an internationally known Native American artist, beadwork artist, and skin sewer. And you'll see some of the beautiful clothing that she's made in a little while when we go ashore. But now we can keep an eye on the fish wheel as we go by here. Notice how it's being pushed by the current. It's driving that basket around. As it comes up, it lifts the fish out of the water. And then as it comes to the vertical, they wiggle their way down into the trough and then finally would be retained in the catching box. Now you'll notice that we have no front on our catching box. That's for a reason. We can allow our wheel to turn then 24 hours a day, and that's okay with Fish and Game, because any salmon lifted out would then be deposited right back in the river. We're not in the business of keeping them. We just want to show you how the wheel works as we go by. But the other wheels are locked down today because Fish and Game has determined that enough salmon has been harvested for the next little while that they're going to close fishing down. They only allow these commercial wheels to turn at certain hours on certain days. And they've gotten pretty high tech at the mouth of the Yukon as to how they count the number of salmon entering fresh water. They actually have a laser beam or a light beam across the river mouth. The salmon break that light and they're counted by computers. So on the right-hand side, you see kind of a modern homestead. These folks have a pretty home they built on the bank with the garden growing here, and but look at this little gray-green bush as we go along right here by the bluff. Anybody from the southwest recognize that? That's actually wild sagebrush. Now, what in the world is it doing here? Well, you're in the middle of a desert, believe it or not. They call this an Arctic desert, the geographers do. We only get about 11 inches of precipitation, counting our snow, in a 12-month period of time. And that, of course, that young man's been a licensed riverboat pilot for 25 years.
What?
And, of course,
That
you
house
met the
is
fellow
big,
that taught
that
him.
white one.
So we're definitely in good hands up there.
I see that.
Thanks, Captain, very much. We're going to head back upstream toward Fish Camp, and at this point, we have our...
The scenery is just absolutely magnificent. I'm standing up on the top deck. You can see the paddle wheel going around. There's the lake.
Made. She also has clothing in museums around the state and on international exhibition in a recent collection that toured the It indicates that fish ate a lot of red brine shrimp, really gorged itself on that red brine shrimp before entering fresh water. That was when it was out on the Bering Sea living in salt water. And once they get into here, they don't eat, they don't sleep, they don't rest. They have one thing on their minds, kind of like my teenage son on Saturday night. Reproduction is all they think about. They want to get up there and get this spawning done. So there's your before picture. Before her left arm falls off, we're going to let Dixie go to work and get that filleting knife right inside, just forward of the tail. She'll go down the backbone on either side and begin to separate the whole into the sum of the parts here. We'll have 2 fillets joined at the tail. We'll have the inner portion, which is the backbone and viscera. The head comes off. It can be split and dried and carried on the trap line in the dog sled. So that would be smoked as well. But there would be sled dogs in a typical fish camp situation. There would be sled dogs living here right with the family. And so the middle portion, the viscera and the backbone, gets put in the plastic bucket. It would be cooked up as salmon chowder for the dogs right here and provide their summer food. Now you'll notice that Dixie will begin making a series of horizontal cuts just down to the skin. Doesn't break the skin, but opens up the fillet so that the smoke from the smokehouse can get up in there and dry more surface area more quickly. Now keep in mind that at fish camp out on these islands all up and down the Yukon and Tanana rivers, they had no refrigeration. So this was a terrific way they developed to preserve the salmon, and it could be stored for many, many months. Thanks, Dixie. Wow, what a great job. Dixie, thanks a lot. That was terrific. Super job. Now we have an open air drying rack. Once the salmon is thoroughly smoked, it could be hung outdoors in good weather. Once it was dry, it would be put in...
The lady in this boat is a lady who ran that little fishing camp demonstration back a little ways back.
Well, now here comes Dixie. This is rush hour on the Tanana this morning. Heading up here in the little, we call that a kicker boat, little outboard boat. Folks would move up and down the rivers a lot back to the main village during fish camp season and first get together out in the middle of the river for reunions. So it's kind of breezy down there. We'll wave to her and encourage her. Get up here to the village and you'll enjoy the time you spend with her at the cabin up there. Dry here. We would certainly not want a fire to get going. We'd lose some irreplaceable artifacts. But I imagine if you're in for cold drinking water, it's real cold in the igloo coolers this morning. Here, back when I thought of Mary when I was on the radio this morning talking about snow in the mountains around Anchorage already. Because we have a little contest. She wants to know when she can throw the first snowball at me, because I'm not a big fan of snow, although I do love to drive these dogs. I know what she goes through getting ready to camp out. But here's a nice picture. We call this parallel parking.
It's my pleasure to share dog sitting with you. I've lived in Alaska for 29 years, and what I love best about living here is taking these dogs for a run in the wintertime. So I thank you for giving me a good reason to harness them up today. The very best way I could really show you just what's so wonderful about dog sledding would be to meet you out on the snowy trail. I'd find a nice big warm parka for you. I'd put you in the basket of the sled. I'd stand on the runners and back, and we'd both hang on for dear life the first couple of miles. The dogs love to tear out of the dog yard full speed ahead. Then after they've burned off a little steam, they settle down to a trot, and they average about 9 miles an hour. Then you and I could relax a little bit. The trail's pretty no matter what the weather. Sometimes it's blowing snow and cold. You have your hood up, your parka ruff pulled in around your face. Other days it's clear and sunny and sparkly. One of my favorite times to go is at night in the moonlight, and it's not quite as bright as daytime, but the snow reflects the light. You can see where you're going just fine. If you're real lucky, you'll have some northern lights come out with pinks and greens and yellows dancing around. That's a real magical time to be out on the trail. I'd like to introduce my dogs to you. This is Flopsy, my lead dog. She's 8 years old. And as you can see, there aren't any reins attached to the dogs. It's just my vocal commands that communicate what I want to do. Since I'm standing here in the middle of the team, I'm not even going to whisper them here. If they all start pulling at the same time, they can break that rope that's holding the sled. Sometimes dogs are a lot like children. You have to spell certain words you don't want them to hear you say out loud. The command to take off is spelled H-I-K-E. So far they haven't learned to spell. I'm one step ahead of them. Turn to the right, I tell my lead dog to G. Turn to the left, I tell her to haw. When I want the team to stop. Come here, Kitty.
When I want the team to stop, I just tell them to whoa. And most of the time they are pretty good. They stop when I ask them to, but if there's something to chase, a fox, a squirrel, a moose, suddenly they all go deaf. They can't hear a word I'm hollering from the back of the sled. And I've dragged along behind that sled more miles than I care to remember. Hopefully today I won't demonstrate the dragging technique for you. Or something. The next two dogs of mine are called swing dogs. They help swing the team around the corners. The red dog is a young dog. His name is Kiddo. He's still learning the finer points of dog mushing. His partner is Solo. She's a veteran in the team. The dogs in the middle of the team are called team dogs. This dog's name is Captain. He's the hardest working dog in the team. He's named after Captain Binkley. He's well named for his namesake. The dogs in the back are called wheel dogs, and these are usually some of your strongest, largest dogs. They have to pull very hard to get the sled started and to get you around the sharp corners. The black dog is Big Boy. He's Kiddo's brother, and the black and white dog is Jack-O-Lantern. He was born on Halloween. I call him Jack for short. These are big, strong freight dogs. They average about 80 pounds. These are more like the draft horses of the dog world. They're bred for strength and endurance rather than speed. But they do take me on the races. They take me on wonderful camping trips, and they're just fine companions. I'll tell you a little bit more about their personalities when you come ashore. I think we'll go for another run now. We're not going to go real fast, but we'll give you a little idea of what it looks like. Try to imagine a foot or two of snow, about 20 below zero, a nice winter morning. Then you'll be in the right mood for dog sledding, and I'll talk to you more when you come ashore.
Now we'll stow the gear and lighten up the emergency brake a little bit. She'll say the magic word. They'll take off. This really is a nice way to travel. When you're out on the trail, you normally just hear the...
Here, get over there. Get over there. Okay.
Stand on the other side.
These are king-size cabbages that this lady grows.
All covered with caribou skins that have been sewn together. Packed around the bottom is moss for added insulation. When they're ready to move on, the skins were taken with them. They're too valuable to leave behind. And as you can see, this shelter was not built by our ancestors because the hole on top is too big. Our next shelter here is a spruce bark hut. It's made of spruce trees that have been cut and pounded into the ground and interwoven with spruce bark. In the fall time, they'd build an identical structure surrounding this one, leaving a 6-inch gap. This gap would be filled with moss or snow for added insulation. The doorway was covered with caribou skin or the moose skin with the hair left on. The ribs are made of steamed and bent birch wood, all covered with birch bark and sewn together with split spruce root. The black resin you see is made of animal fat, caribou or moose hair, and spruce pitch, all boiled together. This acts as a sealant. When you come up closer for a better look, you'll see that there are no metal fastenings on this canoe, no nails or screws, not even super glue.
This passed down mother to daughter, generation to generation. So if a Yupik woman were to go into another village wearing her parka, the people of that village could tell her family name and also which village she's from just from this design. Any guesses? Upstate New York. It's also extremely important for an Eskimo woman's husband to really study and get to know his wife.
I do raise my own line of dogs because I'm looking for nice, tall, big dogs. I'm very careful not to breed dogs that are related to each other. There are lots of very good sled dogs related to each other. Does that answer your question? For people just joining me, the dogs are friendly. If you like dogs, please feel free Rita Petham. These are two brothers and their sister over here. They will be 2 years old in the end of September, and they've been roughhousing like this most of their waking hours for the last 19, 20 months or so. They're trying to figure out who the big brother is and who the little sister is. Sometimes the two of them gang up the big boy, the black one, and I have come to his defense in a few occasions. We'll see what's going to happen today. If you're standing next to one of these vertical fence posts, every now and then the male...
You'll read the real estate ads, and they'll say south-facing or southern exposure. That usually means that you get a good view of the mountains. That land's usually worth a little more, because it has a little more sun on it, of course. Now here we come to the wedding of the rivers.
That's okay. You can call me whatever you want. That's okay. Folks, welcome to the El Dorado Gold Mine, and welcome aboard the El Dorado Express. I got a few things I'm just going to talk about, and we're going to get going. Does that make you feel good? Were you on the riverboat this morning, by any chance? Yeah. Okay, kind of put a few things together. These narrow gauge trains, by the way, this train is a mock-up of the Tanana Valley Railroad car engine number 1, which was here in 1899, the old steam engine. This is how it all starts. You get a gold pan, and they start panning in these creeks. They're looking for gold, and they're looking for minerals. Their work. What they do is they dig all winter long and wash all summer. So this particular shaft, you'll see this is Tim and Rodney, folks. It's about 15 or 20 feet deep. The shaft was dug by the Sweet brothers in 1907. They take the material, run it along the runner board and stockpile it all winter long, weather permitting for them. And then come the summertime, they seal that shaft off, cover it up with good insulation and moss, and take all that material, run it through the sluice box, and wash all summer long. Why? Because the permafrost is the strength in these tunnels, the shafts and the tunnels. The permafrost is permanently frozen ground 365 days a year, until we get some steam down there, or we get some water and rain and heat. Okay? Covered it over, reinforced it.
Boy, it sounds like you got a pretty spunky group today, Earl. All right. Well, did everybody see that shaft before you came down here up above? Yeah. Where they had that hand windlass? Yeah. Okay, well, this is what it looks like down at the bottom of those shafts. Of course, these shafts were spread out all over the valley in the early days. The miners would dig right down to where we are now, to what we call bedrock. Bedrock varies in depth around here quite a bit. Sometimes the bedrock comes right up to the surface. Sometimes it goes real deep down to even 150, 180 feet. In this area, the bedrock's about 20 feet deep. Let me show you some of the strata in this area on this wall back here. I'll explain a little bit about the geology of this area and, of course, why they were down here looking for gold. Now, can everybody see this line right here? There's kind of a delineation between the different materials. Right in here, it comes down over here. Folks back here, you might be able to see it better against this face. The bedrock dips down under these tracks right here, comes up over here. You can see it right across here. There's a pretty distinct line there. That's the bedrock that's down underneath there. And above that, all these materials in here, over in here, these are all washed rocks, washed gravels as we call them. This was once the bed of an ancient stream, and it rolled and tumbled all these rocks you see in here, kind of round and smooth. And then above the washed gravels is the muck, or the overburden. You can kind of see the soil up in this area. That's just wind-blown soil or dirt that's been packed in over many, many years over the top of those gravels. Now, the gold is very, very heavy. It's almost 20 times heavier than water, and probably 10 or maybe 12 times heavier than any of these other stones that you see in here. So the gold wants to settle down. It wants to go way down in the ground, particularly as the Earth's surface moves a little bit with earthquakes or seismic activity and plate tectonic action. Get a little bit of movement in the Earth's surface. That, coupled with water, allows that gold to start working its way down very, very slowly over many, many years until it gets right down onto bedrock. And that's where the pockets of gold are found. So the miners would dig down through all this material until they got to bedrock, and then they'd start to tunnel out, or to drift out as we call it, following those little pockets of gold. That's why we call this drift mining, as they drifted out underground. Now, a little bit later on, when you get up to the gold camp where we're doing our modern day mining, everybody's going to get a chance to do a little bit of gold panning. And when you get your material, they'll give you some concentrate out of the sluice box. You'll put it in a gold pan, you'll get a little bit of water in there, and you'll start to work that material. Now keep in mind this illustration right here when you're doing that, because that's the same thing Mother Nature's done. You want to try and get that gold to work down through all those gravels and sand in your pan, right down to the bottom of the pan, or just like down to bedrock, like Mother Nature does it. And then it's a lot easier to find it right on bedrock. Now, so of course the miners had to get down through this to get to the gold. The only problem was that after this gold moved down to bedrock, we had several different periods of glaciation here in the interior, and all this material above bedrock froze into what we call permafrost. That's ground that's permanently frozen. It's frozen 365 days of the year, and it is hard. It's just as hard as solid rock. And so it was very difficult to dig down through that permafrost. But the early miners found that actually if they utilized some steam or some heat on that permafrost, it would simply thaw out and cave away, and that made it much easier for them to actually mine underground. Rather than using explosives to blow away the material, they could simply thaw it out. So what they would do is up on the surface, they would fire up boilers, usually fueled by wood, and that would create steam. The steam they would run down through lines, like you see here, to what we call steam points. That's just simply a hollow pipe with a tip on it. The steam would come out the tip, and they would use that to thaw away all that permafrost, that frozen material. Once it was thawed, it would fall right away. Then they could haul it in ore cars down underground and then hoist it up to the surface later on. But in order to do this, they had to do all their underground mining in the wintertime. Because if they were mining underground in the summer, that material would simply slough away. So they did it in the winter when it was very cold outside. When it was, anywhere from 0 on down, they'd start working underground. That way they could just thaw the portions that they wanted to, and the rest of the material would stay frozen right in place. And that formed the structure for their tunnels. They didn't need a lot of timbers or a lot of shoring to hold that up because that frozen ground created that tunnel for them. Now before, even with the steam, it was still pretty difficult digging down through that permafrost. There was a lot of work involved. So they'd want to know or have some assurance before they started just digging a shaft any place that there was gold underneath there. So initially they would pan in the streams with gold pans just to see if there was any color, any gold in those little creeks. They'd look for that as well as other signs of mineralization, and those would be some of the clues that they'd look at. Let me show you an example of that mineralization I'm speaking about. Down here to your right, you can see it right against his face. Can everybody see that all right? That's lead, zinc, and silver. Now a vein like this would run right up to the surface and be visible on the surface. And they would see that and then know that that was another indicator that there might be gold nearby. And of course then they'd start thawing down, digging those shafts till they got down to bedrock, and then tunneling out. And you can see here the little tracks that they used. And they used underground ore cars to move that material around the tunnels. We're going to show you how that was done. I'll hold them up here and show you some of the material. Hang on right there, guys. Good, thanks. Show you some of the different materials that they had to move. Now this material right here, this is mica. It's a very soft metamorphic rock, and it's really in great abundance around here. There's a lot of it. It's very, very shiny. You'll see a lot of this in your gold pan too, when you're gold panning. And it'll glisten and gleam, particularly when there's a little bit of water on that. And you'll get all excited when you see a piece of this mica, and you'll think that's a big piece of gold. But unfortunately, it's not. It's just mica. Now we've got another geological term that we like to use for this, and we call it leave it right. As we like to say, leave it right there, it's absolutely worthless. So when you see that, you can just throw it right out of your pan. The gold is a little duller yellow when you see it, and it's malleable. It'll bend, but it won't break like this mica will. They had a lot of this mica to get rid of before they could get down to where the gold was. Now this is a piece of quartz right here. This is what my pleasure. If I bring this up near the forward part of the train, you can see this on your way out.
That'd be nice. Folks, our next stop along the way is going to be a little process. There we go. I'd like to point out a few things for you. Here's Tim, first of all. You can see he gets around the property pretty good, don't he? Tim, we're going to talk about your cabin, about some of the apparatus that you have there. Let's start with the cabin. Look, folks, that thing is built right in the side of that mountain. And there's a simple reason for it. It's just easier to keep that cabin warm during our cold winter temperatures, which can be from 0 to 60 below. And put ripples in the bottom of that to catch the rest. See how that works, folks? And come back here by the cabin in that barrel there and show you a quick panning demonstration. He's looking. Well, 3 weeks ago I got a little one. I don't know. 3 weeks ago. Thanks a lot, Timmy. I appreciate that. Right. If he doesn't have his watch on, I'm going to have to tell him it's in the afternoon. I can see that. Good afternoon, John.
Hello,
A little bright for you?
It is a little bright out here, by golly. It's like the sun's starting to peek out. Of course, it was dark down in those tunnels, as you saw. But as I mentioned before, they worked all winter down in those tunnels. And of course, in the wintertime, we don't have much daylight up here. So those miners would go to work in the morning when it was pitch black dark. They'd work all day long in the dark down underground. They'd come up in the evening, and it'd be pitch black dark out again.
Okay, guys, we got $13 worth of their gold, and how much they get you for it? They got it for $10 to put it between a couple little plastic pieces. Oh.
Yeah! Mr. Engineer, get the throttle and light, people moving me on. Well, mister, can you hear that Alaska sound here? The gold coming down from the far and wide. He's a-moving me on. I can't go wrong. I got gold to pay, I got a lot to say, keep a-moving me on. Yee-haw! Whoa, all right, I better go by while we crank up the old fiddle.
In 1970, when they were looking for a company to produce pipe, there was no foundry in the U.S., no steel foundry that could produce pipe of this size. They actually ended up getting the pipe from Japan. The pipe comes in 60-foot lengths. This is a 60-foot length here, and every 60 feet, when the pipe is above ground, we have a vertical support member that holds it up. The pipe rests on a shoe, so it is protected by a fiberglass encased area. The shoe has a Teflon plate on the bottom. You can walk by and feel it's real smooth. And it allows it to slide back and forth. Any reason why they would slide back and forth? I guess earthquake is one. Expansion and contraction. If you look at the length of the pipe, you'll notice it has a big bend into it. If you take the long piece of steel and you heat it up, it's going to expand. Thank you. The pipeline crosses formation faults. We see some fins. Those are called heat exchangers. What heat exchangers do, they have an anhydrous ammonia inside of them. There's real small pipes that run down through the piling here into the soil. And the anhydrous ammonia is a gas. So it turns into a liquid at about 32 degrees. So in the wintertime, when it's colder than 32 degrees, it becomes a liquid that flows down into the soil, and it helps cool the soil temperature colder than the air temperature does. So it might be 60 below up here, but down there it's a little bit warmer down in the soil. That liquid flowing in there cools it down even more, which deep freezes the soil. So that in the summertime, when the sun is shining against this metal, that heat gets transferred down into the soil. It's going to do a little defrosting. Because they froze it extra cold in the wintertime, it won't defrost enough to become unstable. That is what you call fall unstable area, an area that is right ready to defrost. So even piling into it, disturbing it that much will cause it to become unstable. So they had to put those heat exchangers in. 60 feet away, there is no heat exchanger. That's because the soil condition has changed in 60 feet. We have over there probably a lot more stable soil with a lot of gravel in it, or very little permafrost. About 200 feet away, the pipeline goes underground. That means there's no permafrost at all, or very, very stable soil. This whole valley actually is very stable because it's all been dredged up by the dredges, so the permafrost was defrosted, the gravel was all turned over, so it's got a lot of gravel in the soil, so it's very good for running the pipeline underground here. Because of that individual engineering, every 60 feet, we're going to drill a hole, take out a core sample, look at the soil contents, send it back to an engineer, and have him make a decision. Do we need heat exchangers there? Do we put the pipe below ground? If it's above ground, does it need heat exchangers? And you make those little decisions. And that's what drove the cost of the pipeline up so high. Because it was individual engineered every 60 feet.
That tour guy was talking about, originally they had projected the cost of this pipeline to be $900 million, and it wound up costing $8.9 billion. These black bumpers that you see on the side are to absorb the shock of the pipeline when it moves. They say that the thing does move that much and hits up against that black bumper. There's a section on the pipeline that will hit against that black bumper when the pipe moves to absorb the shock. This is the lobby of the Fairbanks Princess. It's panning around. The balcony of the boat here.
Gosh, I guess you could have definitely 4 or 5 pounds. Yeah.
This is one of the dining areas, or serve a buffet, kind of a lounge, cocktails and television. Get this because it's rather dark. But this is a beautiful restaurant, and through the windows there's a deck that goes right out to the river. We had dinner here the other night. It was very good. So I'm getting a little bit lucky this morning. We're leaving here this morning, and I wanted to get some geese going over. And yesterday was just hundreds of them. And there's a small group going over today. Can't remember whether I took this shot before or not, so I'm going to take it again. It's such a beautiful spot. This is the Chena River, and I'm standing on the deck of the Fairbanks Princess Hotel. It's water very calm. You can see the reflection of the trees. It's just an absolutely beautiful spot. The lights down on the left, a place called Pike's Landing, which is a restaurant that's supposed to be quite good. And we didn't have a chance to eat there, but people were saying it's quite good. This morning, because as you can see, here comes a formation of geese in a V. Going right overhead. There's a few friends swimming in the river in front of the hotel. Here comes another group. Tail end Charlie trying to keep up. Got a section of the moon shining. You can see it's 10:04 back in Baltimore, but it's only 6:04 here. There's a little bit of the moon shining. You can see it's 10:05 here. Excuse me, it's 10:05 in West Virginia, but 6:05 here in Alaska. There's another group. I guess they're geese. One of the tour guides said the geese are on the move. This is one last shot of the hotel. We're leaving this morning, getting on the train to go to Denali. This is one last shot of the hotel. And the river. I don't know whether this is going to take or not, but we just looked out the window and saw this beautiful sky. There's some more geese. The train is apparently late, so the bus driver decided to stop here in downtown Fairbanks. Just pan around. This is a statue that's in the square. It's a statue of the Unknown Family. I believe that's what it's called. Beautiful flowers. Statue. This isn't bouncing around too much. Really can't see where I'm walking. Fairbanks is right built on either side of this Chino River. Beautiful flowers everywhere.
Shopping and a little looking, and then they give me that old line, my bags are full.
And don't try and pull this one on me, or I will sell you a Midnight Sun Express tote bag. I have no problem helping you.
1923, I was close. Had the right year.
Didn't have ugly looking.
This is a Canada.
We were on yesterday.
Well, we had to float into the one we were.
The little town in the Nana right there. We're gonna make a big loop and then we'll be back right in the middle of the city.
We were on that yesterday. Motorbike ride. You know, Princess, look at the cars, Princess.
Aren't they nice?
And one other upper observatory car there, I see.
I see two of them. This is the first one.
Yeah, this is the first.
Oh, Princess, that must be somebody else's. Can't see.
These are flash.
The neat thing about the city of Nenana, has anybody ever heard of the Nenana Ice Club?
How long have you been up here? 3 years.
There are better views of the world to be had.
Nice view coming up to your left here. And you should be over on
Pretty incredible. There you can see that grassy area up there about 10 o'clock. That's some of the old mining area that's under the reforestation plan. There's a coal train loading right here on the tracks. You see where that coal train... So beaver dams on the 9 o'clock side. This is a very spectacular beaver dam.
These mountains here, we're taking pictures from the right side of the train, are all part of the Alaska Ring.
Fairbanks Water, that's
Always gets
yeah, you guys are on bus number 36, I'm on 37, he's on 35.
This is a room, this is the view from our room at the Denali Princess Lodge. I don't know whether you can hear the river sound, but we're only about less than 100 yards from the river. So I'm going to walk down there now. There's a path that leads down to the overlook of the river. I think you can hear the river now. See it down below. Just going to pan around here. She's up higher. You notice the water here is still that grayish color, and the reason for that, this is runoff from glaciers, and it grinds up the rock into a very fine talcum-like powder, and that's what's in this river. And it's sort of a grayish color, but it doesn't affect the fish, I understand. The fish can live in here and thrive in here. Our room is right up through the trees there. We're in the end room. It's room 171. The place looks like it's made out of logs, rather rustic. It's not plush at all, but very comfortable. This is a picture of one of the many restaurants here, and I'll just pan around. That flag there is sort of at half mast. If you want a drink, you raise the flag and somebody will come out and take your order for a cocktail.
I try not to unless I'm taking a picture. Yes, I am. That's not total selfishness. Part of it just, and you know, if somebody, it looks like a fairly good-sized male, just judging by the size of its antlers.
Oh, yes, okay. And then before you get
I'm not sure, but I think I got a caribou on this. So far away you probably can't see it.
at the skyline?
Mm-hmm. I can't get them through here.
Here, look through here.
I think I've got them.
You
Yeah,
got 'em?
yeah.
Yeah, at the very.
It's 3 or 4 of them, isn't
There's 4 of them. Yeah.
it? People walking up there.
No, there's no thing.
What you done? No thing.
This way. Yeah, but there's no button to push.
The other
I hit him right from another male, but it's not a particularly large area. It's easier to see them from a greater distance. That's why they have that kind of white throat, dark rear end, and also the antlers that go up and branch out, because it's visually easier to see it.
He's not moving. He works for MGM.
And it'd be kind of fun to see another kind of animal.
Right.
He's charging us gold.
We'll see what we can find.
Boy, he is big. Oh, the antlers on that, buddy.
Yes.
Let's see if this little panoramic camera will do anything. Okay. Yeah, I can get a good.
I know it's wrong.
Get a good view of that.
The East Fork of the Toklatch River. Did it?
Many colors. And ahead of us is some of the inspiration for that name.
You can see we're up pretty high and right on the edge of the road.
So volcanic iron oxidizes it turns all of those various shades. This particular corner is known as Rock and Roll Corner. It certainly is migratory. So we're not going to stay here very long.
Doesn't like brown. However, she drove me out on a 4-person seaplane yesterday, and that was all worth it.
Oh, really?
Through the clouds and down this valley, you can see the top half of the top part of Mount McKinley up through the clouds. It's about 50 miles from where we are.
They are. They're see
where this tag is on this one.
The rear end of one.
Yeah, so I can see him in the camera.
Oh, there.
My fingers pointing.
One of them bigger than the other, or what?
Yeah.
Right over there, this bear. Back a couple of yards.
To your right a little bit. Your right.
Look at him standing. Thanks for the help. You guys want to get in over here? No, I can get in. Yeah, look at that.
Stand up. Stand up.
There, that's still there.
There, very much so.
No, that's fine, thank you.
You see it?
Yeah, I got it.
You want to get it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I got a picture of him.
He's going to do a dance. Get the baby.
Just totally ignored.
And then sure enough.
Man, it's something bad.
Now, is that, that's not a male and a female, is that a
Female and a cub and gold too.
female and a cub?
Look at that. They're female there.
I went through 15 shots.
The female will keep the cubs anywhere upwards of 3.5 years.
Oh, look at Miss Africa.
Hold on a minute. How about a stand up? Stop.
That's right. I've lost it now.
It's darker color than the other one.
It might not be a grizzly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, look at him.
Amazing.
Is that a grizzly?
That's a grizzly, yep.
Yeah, okay. It's a female, too. What do you call them?
Silverback too.
Yeah, look at him.
Actually, that's kind of the old name. They've actually changed it to Ursus arctos.
Oh, but that sounds too...
Well, that's one of the reasons why they actually changed it, because there was such a connotation that comes with grizzly bears, and
Trying to give him a good name.
well, give them a more accurate name, maybe.
He's digging into his ground squirrels.
Well, it's hard for me to imagine that that bear could see a ground squirrel from where it seemed to have started. But maybe, huh? He's certainly... No, it hasn't got it yet. It just keeps looking to see if it pops up.
Big head, the ears popped right up.
Digging. Got his head down. His head down.
He's nice and fat.
Can you see it? See the glasses?
Wonderful. Oh, boy.
See it, Mayor?
Another one around here. Stand right up.
Yeah, me too.
He's good.
See?
Yeah, I can see
He's going in, yeah.
He's mooning us.
Best they can do.
There he turned. Briefly. Taking more pictures.
That was with the other camera.
That was with an elephant though.
Right.
He gets so excited the way that's hanging down.
And you can picture that ground squirrel underground digging like crazy.
Sending up fumes.
Look at him go after that thing.
Can you see?
Can you keep the camera on and kiss him?
I can't seem to get. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
He's right down on his knees like.
He's turning up for you.
Do you want to read it?
Yeah, he's really gonna have that. Oh. Where'd he go? Got it? Look at the dirt.
Whoa, boy, he's a big hole over there.
He's looking around for that squirrel.
Thanks.
It's really a hole about almost a foot deep over there. He'll be doing a permafrost pretty soon. Your turn. I can see pretty good.
Yeah, really, somebody forgot to tell him about being careful on the tundra. Bob, you think he's after a squirrel? That's right.
Oh yeah, it's definitely after a squirrel.
What, would a squirrel burrow like that?
Oh, yeah.
Ground squirrel does.
I would. Yeah.
Well, I think it did. Either it has or it is.
He's looking around.
I'm okay.
Okay, he's moving a lot of dirt over there.
Yeah, I've stood in a hole that a bear has dug to get a ground squirrel out, and I was almost waist deep in it.
He's got something.
He's talking Chinese now.
He's got something.
Oh yeah, he's got some.
Uh-oh. You got it?
I don't think so.
No.
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, it looks like a groundhog.
It's just its nose.
Look at him. Look at him.
Oh, okay, the ground squirrel must have sort of popped.
There he is. He's running back there.
Down the hill.
Did something run? Oh,
Gosh, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh. Look at that. Oh my gosh. He found another hole.
wow.
Oh.
Now you can see how fast ground squirrels are.
How fast the bear is, too.
He's determined. He's hungry.
What's that thing about?
Maybe a pound.
He's mad, really. Yeah, he's really going to town. Look at that.
That would be enough to feed the 20 of them.
Oh yeah.
Right there.
Well, that's what's always so interesting. Why they do expend a tremendous amount of energy trying to catch a ground squirrel. And the basic theory is that they just get some, some sort of different types of maybe fats or proteins or something from meat that they don't get from the vegetation that they eat.
Must be a real delicacy.
I think bears are a lot more practical than people.
Probably
We've seen them up in Canada at the dumps going after rats, and they love rats.
That was
Yeah, that was black bears.
some protein.
It's kind of amazing that ground squirrel remembered where the other opening was.
He happened to find one, I think.
Thinking under stress.
Yeah, that's good.
He's digging like the Dickens.
Where did he go? He's panting. He's panting. All that work and I still didn't get him.
You don't get that squirrel, he's gonna come over here and empty this.
Uh-oh.
Shadows now. Just a little bit of silver.
He's oblivious to us.
Well, down here, there's plenty of meat there. I got some venison sausage or whatever you call it.
But that'd be good.
Isn't he something? There he goes.
There he goes.
Did he get him?
Yep. Dinner time. Dinner
time.
He earned it. He earned it, didn't he?
Darn, I give up. I'm going home.
Probably about 6 bites.
Looks like two.
We kind of hoped that the ground squirrel had some of its offspring left too, because that was doing a pretty good job there for a while.
Yeah, he was.
Just don't come over here for dessert.
Yeah. If you put the candle instead of where he was digging, poor squirrel.
I see him when I look out.
Just start going virus.
Yum, 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 yum.
Oh, he can see his mouth go.
Much more than 2 bites.
He had right.
So it takes more than a couple of bites.
Yeah, it does. Well, that's not a small squirrel, though. Those are pretty good size. That makes me hungry. Yeah, those ground squirrels are pretty big. Yeah.
Did you get all that? Taste a little.
I got quite a bit of it, Peggy.
Just something.
That's a pretty decent sized bear. It's probably 400 or 500 pounds.
Well, I bet it is too. I mean, whatever it is, it's a squirrel. He's so silly. Tearing apart. Look at all those holes together now.
Yeah. Just dug up the mountain. Get that thing.
Keep moving your head. Right, left. How? Oh, you can see all the holes in the hillside there.
Oh.
I could get them when we're moving.
Boy, that was
Folks want to look at it a little more, or shall we move on?
We're okay.
Come on, we can go.
Look right along.
There's 3 of them there.
I can see
The one laying down?
Yeah, there's about 3 of them.
I'm a bear man.
You're a bear man. There's 4 of them there. Oh, yeah.
Daughter raising.
Right on that.
Enough of that.
That's a real typical kind of place to find sheep, because it's high up, still got something for them to eat.
The one's coming down. Up when you get into the blue sky, you can see 2 of them sitting up there high. Right near the top of that little rocky ridge.
They're going to come down to the bus.
Yeah, it's a
I don't want to
great
rate
day.
that one.
No, I haven't
The question is, are they kids?
So, shall we try John?
Yeah.
Cellular phone.
Yeah.
Those damn things.
Yeah, that's
I moved over.
She puts her head up, chomps away.
Oh, that's a lady. Oh, okay. And then just behind this.
Raised away.
Man, she's big.
Oh, look there now. Oh, look. Oh, you see all of them. All her. She yes.
Oh, wow. Now look at that. Look at that.
Striking is a big animal.
That's a perfect.
Somewhere around 7 feet tall at the shoulders. Wow. Upwards of 1,000 pounds.
Posing for a picture.
Yeah.
They're not the brainiest of all the deers.
Hi, Lisa. Did you get a good picture?
They sure eat.
Yeah, she's in good shape.
She's nice.